We also have Mike Underhill, Chief Executive of ICA, and Skip Leitner, who's joined us from the USA. And I will say a word about each of them separately just before they come up to the podium. So let's just start with the Honourable Minister. Simon was elected to Parliament in 2008 and made Minister in April 2012. And he was promoted to Cabinet in January 2013 and took on the portfolio of Minister of Energy and Resources. He's also the Minister of Labour and Associate Minister for Climate Change Issues. As our international guests would have worked out by now, most of us in New Zealand wear several different hats. It's one of the great pleasures of being here. He began, while Simon has worked hard in Parliament across a number of issues, the beginning of 2010 noted a significant achievement for him. He initiated a private member's bill to amend the Animal Welfare Act so that animal cruelty is better dealt with by the courts. This legislative change quickly developed grassroots support and became a government bill. And the Animal Welfare Amendment Bill toughened the regime for offending against animals in a comprehensive way and became law in July 2010. Simon has a BA in Political Science and History and in a law degree from Auckland University, and he's also completed a Bachelor of Civil Law from Oxford University. Simon, we very much look forward to hearing what you have to say to us. Please welcome the Honourable Simon Bridges.
Thank you very much for those kind words, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to be here this morning. Energy is an integral part of our daily lives. It's the foundation on which we build economic growth, prosperity, and progress in our societies. Across the globe, we are all facing the same basic energy challenge. We want our citizens and countries to continue to develop and prosper. But we need to reduce carbon emissions from our energy use and respond to climate change. We also need a supply of energy that's reliable and affordable. At the moment, the world is in a transition phase towards a low carbon future. In this transition, fossil fuels remain an important part of the mix. The International Energy Agency expects coal, oil and natural gas will continue to account for more than half the world's energy needs until at least 2035. The national government's energy policy understands this reality. In the US, President Obama speaks of an all-of-the-above policy on energy. That is also what we have here in New Zealand. Our balanced and mixed approach means that I'm motivated by the opportunities petroleum development presents for New Zealand socially, economically and environmentally. It's also widely acknowledged that gas will play a critical role in reducing carbon emissions worldwide. And New Zealand could play a real part in this if a significant gas find were made. This is why we've worked hard to attract major international companies to invest in petroleum and minerals exploration and development in New Zealand. New Zealand has to compete with other countries for international investment capital. It's encouraging to see world-class companies like Statoil from Norway and Woodside from Australia choosing to invest in New Zealand. But while I'm motivated about petroleum development, I'm also very excited about renewables. It is renewables and smart technology that will be the key to meeting longer-term global energy needs. Innovation and competitive markets are the smart way, in my view, to ensure this happens. One of the best examples of competitive and innovative markets that's already delivering secure, affordable and environmentally sound energy in New Zealand is New Zealand's electricity market. New Zealand is extremely fortunate in having abundant renewable resources like water, geothermal and wind. Electricity generation from renewables now makes up about 75% of our electricity generation. This makes us fourth in the OECD. New generation capacity being built here is mainly using renewables, particularly geothermal and wind. This is happening based on competition between generators without the need for government subsidies or incentives. There is currently 166 megawatts of geothermal capacity, 60 and 60 megawatts of wind capacity under construction. In the future, gas-fueled plants are likely to be used mainly for peak periods and in dry years. New Zealand is now a world leader in our use of geothermal resources for electricity. The world's largest binary cycle geothermal power station was recently commissioned here. In the last 6 years, New Zealand has doubled our geothermal electricity generation capacity and seen more than $2 billion invested in geothermal plant. In that period, 1,100 megawatts of geothermal energy was installed around the world. Half of it, 550 megawatts here in New Zealand. New Zealand is now also making good use of our high quality wind resources. A turbine on a New Zealand wind farm runs on average 40% of the time, compared to around 30% internationally. Wind is now playing a small but significant role in electricity generation. It contributed around 5% of our electricity in the year to 30 September 2013, and given the large number of additional potential sites, wind and geothermal electricity generation could double or even treble over the next couple of decades. It is the economics of these options for wind and geothermal generation that have made them increasingly attractive to generators. The generators compete with each other to build the next best generation option. A forward hedge market sends longer-term signals to investors on what the market is prepared to pay for electricity in the future. This competitive market for electricity generation delivers the lowest cost source of energy for retailers to sell to consumers. New capacity based on renewables is also increasingly crowding out the older thermal stations. For example, the 30-year-old Huntly Power Station has retired 2 of its 250 megawatt units over the past 2 years, which halved its coal-burning generation capacity. In addition, gas plant is now increasingly used as, quote, firming plant, filling in when demand peaks or wind or hydro generation is reduced. Changes made to the competitive market also mean New Zealand is now much better able to cope with a dry year without the need for consumer conservation campaigns. The 2012 year was one of the driest on record, but this went largely unnoticed by consumers. The reason for this is that if a conservation campaign is called, then electricity companies will now need to compensate consumers. It's good to see how changing incentives can, and in this case does, have a positive effect on water management strategies and market behaviour. Of course, success and economic growth doesn't have to mean consuming more and more energy. A recent OECD study looked at the relationship between ICT and the demand for energy. ICT is key to driving productivity and innovation. And with initiatives like the ultra-fast broadband program, it's a big focus for the government. Interestingly, the OECD study found that increased ICT use in an economy comes with a reduction in total energy demand and an increase in the relative demand for electric over non-electric energy. Having a secure supply of clean, affordable electricity generation will stand New Zealand in very good stead in a digital future where electricity becomes even more important as an energy source. Electric energy also offers a wide range of other future possibilities, including an opportunity to reduce our use of fossil fuels in transport, to increased use, for example, of electric cars. With renewable electricity generation already at 75% in New Zealand, we're aiming for a target of 90% of electricity generation from renewables by 2025. This is and will be a real advantage for our country. By contrast, Australia generates about 13% of its electricity from renewables and has a target of 20% by 2020. The UK has a 10.3% share of electricity from renewables with a target of 50% by 2015. And Germany has 21% from renewables with a target of 35% by 2020. Some governments have gone down the track of introducing subsidies and other government interventions to try to accelerate the move towards renewables. Generous feed-in tariffs have been used in both Spain and Germany to incentivise solar energy. These tariffs, of course, provide a guaranteed regulated payment to people who use photovoltaic generators, which is above the wholesale price and even sometimes above the retail price. This has seen significant expansion of solar technology in these countries, but I would argue it's had some unintended consequences. Electricity prices have increased, and in Germany they are over 50% higher than in New Zealand. There's now enough photovoltaic capacity to meet 30 to 40% of Germany's daytime load, but this has created grid stability issues. It's not easy to shut off solar PV, so if Germany finds itself unable to export excess electricity to neighbouring countries, this creates congestion on the German grid. And there's a different problem on days when the sun isn't shining. The rapid uptake of solar in Germany has also contributed to increased electricity generated emissions, as it has encouraged the construction of more thermal generation to ensure adequate electricity supplies when solar isn't available. In New Zealand, where we already have a high proportion of renewables driven by market forces, solar voltaic comes in at about 3 times the cost of geothermal and wind. For most people, I would argue the economics don't stack up. And by far the majority of cases, New Zealand's households would not recoup the cost of installing a solar PV system. Even over a period of 15 years or longer, subsidies might increase the uptake, but they don't work for solar in New Zealand. New Zealand needs to take a smarter approach and think about how emerging top technologies such as solar could work better in a more integrated way. Vector is currently running a successful pilot program of domestic solar PV in combination with batteries. The storage batteries enable some surplus energy to be stored during the day when the house is empty and released as needed at night when the household is busy turning on lights, cooking the evening meal and using other electrical appliances. End users can monitor what's happening on their smartphones using the internet and smart meter technology. The batteries are also connected to the grid, so Vector has the ability to release energy from them to reduce peak demand and manage traffic on their distribution network. This could enable Vector to avoid unnecessary expenditure in network capacity. Customers, in my view, will respond to technologies when it delivers what they want, not what policymakers, politicians, activists or energy experts think they should want. In the Vector pilot, all of these technologies are working together to deliver on what customers almost certainly want: better service, more control, more reliability and cost savings for end users and for the network, as well as delivering on environmental objectives. It is this sort of smart thinking that's needed to make technologies like solar really succeed in New Zealand without subsidies, I might add. And this also gives us a glimpse of what some of the key drivers of energy markets in the future may be. Dispersed small-scale generation, where investment is happening at the customer level. Smart meters are giving customers much more information and control over how they use energy, and using the internet to network these dispersed sources of power together, thus allowing the optimization of the system as a whole. So this means some sources of new generation may be located closer to users and be on a much smaller scale than the huge energy projects of the past, with individual customers selling their surplus energy back into the grid for distribution to other users. This is a significant change from the historical model of large-scale, centralised power stations disseminating electricity from a central grid. The new technology being developed empowers consumers by giving them more information and control. In many ways, this is the ICT revolution coming to the energy markets. Internet, the explosion of cheap computing power, and the smartphone revolution are busy turning other industries on their heads, as well as the energy sector. A number of local electricity retailers are already offering tools such as real-time household electricity monitoring via smartphone apps. In the future, this is likely to develop into highly sophisticated tools that allow customers to control rather than just monitor their usage, for example, to take advantage of low-cost periods. The way markets and customers can interact in future will be the key to unlocking the benefits of smart electricity technologies and increasing energy efficiency. This is about communications and ICT, and it's also about having a robust and smart electricity grid that can deal with fluctuations in supply and conveys market-based signals quickly and efficiently between the different components of the electricity system: generators, transmission retailers and users. Internationally, spending on smart grid technologies such as advanced metering and fault management is increasing. In 2012, global spend on smart grids was $13.9 billion, with around half of this being spent on smart metering and related infrastructure and services. This investment was 7% higher than in 2011 and is expected to rise to $25.2 billion by 2018. In New Zealand, we can build on the work that's happening overseas. Global investment in distributed automation, demand response, in home energy management, or smart electric vehicle charging will deliver technical advances that we can use to reduce energy consumption, keep our businesses competitive, or make our homes more comfortable. Smart meters are already in more than 50% of New Zealand homes and growing. This isn't in my speech notes, but I reckon that's the highest number of smart grids per population in the world. If anyone has a contrary view, they should let me know. But that's my story until I'm told otherwise. I'm sticking with it. When combined with smart pricing plans, smart appliances and home automation, they can help customers use less power at peak times when it's expensive, and of course more at off-peak times. Enough changes in consumption patterns across the whole power system could mean fewer peak generators and smaller power lines required and lower costs. The International Energy Agency has called energy efficiency the world's first fuel. It means we can avoid using energy sources that cost more and damage the environment. Using energy more efficiently will also help to displace aging infrastructure and reduce carbon emissions. On the supply side, advances in technology mean transmission networks can make use of more granular and timely information to help them manage their assets better and to provide better services. For example, faster identification of a network fault, such as a tree fallen on a line, would enable quicker repair and power restoration for affected households. And better information about the condition of power system assets, like poles and transformers, could mean less time and money spent on routine maintenance and renewal, resulting in lower costs for consumers. These emerging technologies will make very different demands on the electricity systems of the future. We need to make sure New Zealand's well positioned to capture the benefits of solar energy, electric vehicles and advanced meters, as well as developments in distributed automation, distributed storage and demand response. All parts of the system need to come together to make this happen. Generators, retailers, distributors, businesses, scientists, consumers, investors. That's why the government has worked with the Electricity Networks Authority to set up a Smart Grid Forum. The new Smart Grid Forum will provide a platform for dialogue between senior representatives from all parts of the electricity system, including consumers as well as business, scientific and academic interests. Similar forums have already been set up in a number of other countries. I announced the forum in February. Today I'm very pleased to tell you who has been appointed to the forum. The members are Alan Miller, University of Canterbury, Ralph Sims, Massey University, Rogan Clark, Advanced Meter Services, Neil Chain, Fisher and Paykel, Renaud Verster, Vector, Joanne Park, Unison, Derek Todd, Delta Utility Services, Stephen Drew, Inanock, Simon Clark, Trust Power, Matt Old, Mighty River Power, Ari Sargent, Power Shop, Richard Maniton, Countdown, John Carnegie, Business New Zealand, Linda Amatrano, Building Research Association, Hamish Wilson, Consumer NZ, John Clark, Trust Power, Gareth Wilson, MB, Johns Hancock Secretary, Paul Atkins, National Energy Research Institute, who will be chairing it, John Hamill, Commerce Commission, Craig Evans, Electricity Authority, and Terry Collins of ECA. The forum is due to meet for the first time this month, and I'm confident they'll make a strong contribution to the development of smart electricity networks in New Zealand. Ladies and gentlemen, I've said a lot now, but there's a lot that I wanted to say. And as I said at the outset of this speech, energy is integral to our lives. The National Government's mixed and balanced approach is making, I think, the most of all of New Zealand's energy opportunities. The smart and integrated use of developing technologies, coupled with our abundant renewable resources and a competitive electricity market, creates an exciting future for energy in New Zealand. I believe the smart grid forum can play a very significant role in this. Thank you very much. I'm happy to, I can see some of your faces that I know it's a live crowd. I'm happy to take questions if there are. G'day.
Hi there, I would just like to say what you're saying in terms of goals sound really great, but I was wondering if you could explain the disproportionate allocation of resources and staffing towards fossil fuels compared to renewable energies. Really sort of provides the one direction and only one field to be above rhetoric.
Yeah, I simply don't accept what you're saying. I think if you look at the figures we put into ECA, we put into bioenergy and a number of other areas, and you balance it up, that broadly speaking what we put in New Zealand petroleum and minerals, I don't think you'd find that they'd be unbalanced in any way. I also think, as I said in an interview with Energy News last week, that what is true is I have spent some time for a whole bunch of reasons I'm happy to go into, pursuing petroleum and resources agenda in the last year or so. Because actually I think that they create higher paying jobs, and environmentally I think there is an incredibly strong rationale for gas solving our, or being a big part of the solution at least, to world energy and climate problems into the future. But having said all of that, I think God willing, a national-led government being elected later this year, you'll see me over coming months, and if I continue in that portfolio, the next year around energy efficiency and carbon emissions. And so I agree with you in one regard. Obama's all of the above is rhetoric. It's exactly why it's good rhetoric, and that's why I use it as well. But I think there's flesh on the bones. Specifically, I know the Green Party loves to have a go at National about fossil fuel subsidies. Well, if you look at that, there's some strong rationale for what we do scientifically in another bunch of ways. But yep, I'm willing to accept these subsidies. Actually, what Fatih Birol of the IEA, their economist, told me, who's probably one of the leading experts in this, is that we are cleaner than any other country he knows of in the world in this regard. So, I think actually we've got a pretty strong sort of story on that. We also, as I've said, do a fair bit of subsidies on the other side, bioenergy and a variety of things that Mike and his team do in ECA. So I think it is balanced, and we can be pretty I feel confident about that. G'day.
Thank you, Simon. appreciated that, and I like the idea that there could be 90% renewables by 2025. It's not particularly ambitious, but it is a start, given where we are at New Zealand. And we have been looking for the plan to get us there.
Yep.
I know that there's a national policy statement on renewable energy, renewable electricity, which is feeding into district plans, and it's great to have start with a smart grid forum.
Yep.
I can see that it's important to pray to a higher being for electoral success. And I went to Moby yesterday, or day before yesterday, and was told that in terms of a plan the market would provide.
Yep.
Is that a similar approach that you would?
And getting to 90%?
Yes.
Yeah. The higher power, well, you know, there's an invisible hand or something, is there? Look, 90%, you know, yeah, ambitious, non-ambitious. We're, as I said, fourth in the world right now, behind, what is it, Norway, Iceland, and I want to say it's Luxembourg, but could be making that up, always forget the third. Norway is 99.something% renewables, that's all hydro, right? And of course they're one of the biggest oil and gas exporters in the world on the other side of it. So you know, I think if you say we're fourth, that's pretty good. If we got to 90%, I think we'd move into what would be about that second or third.
I guess I'm just wondering what the plan is.
Yep. No, I have you give you a sense of that. The issue is demand, right? The issue is demand, and that is the one thing that gets in the way with 90%. If we had increased electricity demand, I would be exceptionally confident we could get to high 80s or 90. But demand's flat at the moment. And so if you look at the numbers I see on consented, and I think I touched on this, and so on consented generation, ready to go from the truss powers and the Genesis and so on of this world, it's effectively all, I think there's a very small amount of gas, but it's effectively all geothermal and wind. So the stuff coming down the pipeline for new electricity demand is renewables. But as I say, the conundrum is demand on that side. And so is there a plan? Well, I don't think that New Zealanders would want me to go out and build new generation, or to do something to create new generation when I already know when it is built it's going to be renewables faster, right? I don't think that makes economic sense, or particularly any kind of other sense. I also, to come to your point pretty squarely about, you know, is it the market or is something else? Well, it's the market with a nudge and a few bits and with a few areas. That's why we've got the Smart Grid Forum, to actually make sure that we are thinking smartly about these technologies and so on, and we are making sure they're getting used. I'm happy to nudge that along when we come. But I have a not an ideological view, I think it's a pragmatic view grounded in the reality of what's happened around the world, like Germany, that I talked of, spoke of, that actually you've got to be, you can have incentives, you can play around with the market to some extent. In some cases, the rationale for that, you've got to be very careful when you do, because, you know, you want my view straight. I'm not really trying to be political, but if you look at the Labour Greens power policy, my clear view, I'm not giving you policy, this is what I genuinely believe, is if they implement that, you'll see thermal for longer than you will under a market-based system. So I reckon. So, yep, we've got a target. I reckon we'll get it, because I just think that the cost competitiveness of renewables in this country makes a huge amount of sense. But I do think that ultimately the market's going to deliver that without the need for me to come along and somehow offer something special for geothermal. We've seen it the last couple of years with Te Mihi and Ngā Tamariki.
So would you say there's no plan, but there's a lot of hope? No,
I don't think that's. I think that is a plan, actually. I mean, I think I'm getting a clear-sighted view of how we get 75%. Look, when we came into office, it was 65%. It's now 75%. The figures that will be released today are 75 point something %. for 2013. The last quarter of last year was 84.5%. Right, so it is all tracking the right way. So the reverse of your point is, why would I come in with some different plan when what we're doing already is working? You maybe like to ask.
Can we just take one more question and then Ralph?
G'day.
Yeah, thank you, Minister, for your overview, and very, very interesting. Wearing your other hat, which relates to climate change, if we've got projected growth from MFE of a significant amount of energy and greenhouse gases over the next 2 decades, and if we've got roads of significance to national, as I call them, being developed, and if we've got our forest plantations ready for harvesting, and if ECA's budget isn't quite what it used to be, how are we ever going to meet the 5% unconditional target to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions 5% below 1990 net energy levels within 6 years?
Yep. Let me give you a few views. Obviously, it's hugely complex. Climate change is the sort of thing that I could open my mouth and go for 20 minutes on. And, you know, hopefully you'd be better informed by the end of it. Let me just say something. I feel really strongly, and some of you will disagree with me, right? But I just think that it's clear as day to me. And then I tried to allude to this in the speech at the start, and it's my firmly held view. You look around the world right now, coal use is increasing, right? And you go to Asia and coal use is increasing. You want to know the single most important phenomenon that makes a difference to climate change right now? It's gas, right? Some of you don't like that, but that's the facts of life in the world we live in right now. And if you think that PVs by themselves, they're fantastic, and the prices, I totally agree with that, the worship coming down, and we'll get there on that over time. But if you want to know what's going to make the biggest difference in an energy sense to climate change, it is gas in the foreseeable future. And I know some of you shaking your head, you disagree, but that's my view, having thought a lot and read a lot about global energy trends and what's happening. And that's not to say that renewables aren't better. Of course they are, but that's the situation there. You come to New Zealand, and I'm not making excuses, but we are 0.14% of global emissions. We have to do something, but again, it's a global solution. It's the Chinas and Americas and Brazils that will make a difference. You mentioned roads. Actually, electric cars need roads. Electric buses do. And I think you could make a number of arguments about why, in a climate sense, it's not necessarily the bogey that some would point to. I don't want to preempt announcements I'm going to make a little way down the track. But actually, I've been thinking a lot about the sort of issue that you raise, and I think ECA has a very definite role in that space in relation to carbon emissions. And let me just say to you, if you think about our carbon emissions, what is it? A bit under half from cows and other horticultural, or agricultural emissions. You then look at the other half, and really the ones where we can, I think, make a difference are transport and are industrial processes, and often that is around the agriculture sector. And so I'm not going to say to you that I've got some solution that's going to solve those issues, but I am thinking about those things. I think there are initiatives in those areas that will make a difference, and I'll be talking more about them later this year.
Minister, thank you very much indeed. We could go on firing questions at you all morning, but we have 2 other keynote speakers to introduce to the platform. So will you join with me in thanking you?
Thanks very much.